A German Shepherd puppy collapsed on a desert road until a U.S. Marine gave the last water left. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The heat comes first. A wavering curtain rising off the asphalt, bending the horizon until the straight desert highway looks like it's melting under the noon sun. The air tastes of dust and copper, the kind that dries your throat just by breathing. And there, lying motionless at the edge of the faded yellow line, is a German Shepherd puppy no bigger than a football, his tiny chest fluttering in shallow, uneven breaths. His paws twitch weakly, barely disturbing the powder-fine sand beneath him. He isn't supposed to be alive in this kind of heat. Not out here, in the middle of a desert road stretching through southern Arizona, where shade is a memory and water is a promise the land rarely keeps. His fur, once soft, is now dulled by sand and sun. His ears, too heavy to lift, tremble at the passing roar of a distant truck, but he makes no sound. Only the faintest gasp, barely a whisper against the wind. And then, far down the road, a hum. A steady engine, not rushed, not reckless, just moving with the quiet confidence of someone who has traveled lonely miles before. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer drives with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near an almost empty canteen rolling lazily on the passenger seat. The temperature gauge warns him of the desert's grip, but he's used to heat. He's endured worse under foreign suns, carrying more weight than any man should. Dan narrows his eyes behind dusty sunglasses. Something small lies ahead on the shoulder. At first, it's just a speck, another piece of debris abandoned by the wind. But as his truck approaches, the shape becomes clearer, too soft to be metal, too still to be brush, too fragile to ignore. A familiar ache tightens in Dan's chest, the kind that rises. Whenever he remembers the one soldier he couldn't save years ago, lost under a sun not so different from this one. He eases off the gas. The world seems to quiet. The puppy does not lift his head. He does not even flinch. He simply lies there, caught between breath and silence, waiting for something, someone, to notice. Dan pulls the truck to the shoulder, dust billowing around the tires in a slow, tired cloud. The heat hits him the moment he steps out, a wall of scorching air that steals the breath from his lungs. But he doesn't stop. His boots crunch on gravel as he approaches the tiny, trembling body. The closer he gets, the heavier the moment feels, as if the world is holding its breath with him. He kneels beside the pup. A fragile sigh escapes the small creature, barely more than a thread of life. Dan's hand hovers over the little chest, feeling the faint, skipping rhythm of a heart fighting against the odds. The Marine swallows hard. His canteen is nearly empty. His own lips are dry, his head pulsing with the beginnings of dehydration. But the pup's need is greater. And without thinking, without hesitation, Dan whispers, "Easy, little guy. I've got you," and everything begins from there. The sun presses harder against the desert as Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer lifts the tiny puppy into his arms, feeling how light he is, how fragile. The pup's fur is warm from the road, carrying the scent of hot asphalt and dust, and his breath brushes faintly against Daniel's wrist like a quiet plea. The Marine glances toward his truck, its metal shimmering under the harsh noon glare, and he knows the cab will feel like an oven the moment he opens the door. Still, he holds the puppy close, shielding him with his body as he moves. His boots grind against the gravel, each step slow, careful, as if the heat itself might steal whatever life remains in the little creature. When Daniel settles into the driver's seat, he places the pup gently on a folded field jacket, adjusting the vents so the small body receives the first hint of cooling air. The air conditioner struggles, coughing warm air before finally pushing out a tired breath of relief. Daniel watches the puppy's chest rise, then fall, uneven but present. He wipes sweat from his forehead. The canteen beside him rolls again, striking the console softly, a reminder of what he has already given away. "Hang in there," he murmurs, letting the words settle in the quiet cab. The puppy flicks an ear, only barely, but it is enough to make Daniel feel a small spark of hope. He turns the key, and the truck rumbles forward down the empty stretch of highway. The desert rolls out around them, an endless sea of gold and rust, dotted with distant saguaros standing like silent witnesses. Heat ripples across the horizon, blurring the far mountains into soft shapes. Daniel keeps glancing toward the jacket, watching for signs that the pup is slipping away again. Once, the tiny body shifts, a slow, uncoordinated movement. Daniel holds his breath, waiting. The pup exhales, long and soft, and settles again. "Good job, little guy," the Marine whispers, feeling something loosen inside his chest, something he has kept locked behind duty and old grief. The miles pass under his tires, but the engine temperature begins to creep higher. The truck groans, unhappy with the strain. Daniel lowers the speed to ease the load, even though it means longer in the heat. He does not mind. He would rather crawl across the desert than risk losing the pup now. A faint sound comes from the passenger side, a tiny hum, almost like a sigh spoken into a dream. Daniel turns his head just enough to see the puppy's nose tremble, his whiskers quivering at the cooled air drifting across his face. It is the first sign of comfort the little creature has shown. Daniel smiles gently, the kind of smile a man makes when something inside him begins to heal without him noticing. "You are tougher than you look," he says softly. He adjusts the vents again, making sure the cool air reaches the pup fully. The desert continues to shimmer outside, relentless and bright, but inside the cab there is a fragile pocket of mercy forming. Daniel keeps driving, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near the pup as if guarding the tiny life with nothing more than presence and hope. Heat shimmers along the lonely highway as Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer drives on, one hand steady on the wheel, the other hovering close to the small German Shepherd puppy resting on his folded field jacket. The pup's breathing is soft and shallow, but it is there, a fragile rhythm that keeps Daniel pushing forward. The truck's air conditioner finally settles into a cooler flow, spreading a thin layer of relief through the cab. Daniel glances at the dashboard and notices the engine temperature climbing again, inching toward a level that makes him uneasy. He knows the desert demands respect. He also knows he is asking this old truck to do more than it comfortably can. A few miles ahead, he spots a weathered sign announcing a small gas station and rest stop, its paint faded by years of sun. The sight brings a small exhale from his chest. It is not a veterinary clinic, but it is shade, water, and maybe help. As the truck rolls into the gravel lot, the heat seems to gather around them, thick and determined. Daniel shuts off the engine and carefully lifts the pup, holding him against his chest. The little body feels warmer than before, almost hot, as if the desert has seeped into his bones. Daniel moves toward the narrow strip of shade beside the building, his breath steady, his steps deliberate. The scent of gasoline and warm metal lingers in the air, mixing with the dry dust that clings to the back of his throat. He sits on the edge of the concrete, placing the pup gently on his lap. The pup's eyes flutter but do not open fully, as if he is drifting at the edge of consciousness. Daniel dips his fingers into the melting ice water from a cooler near the vending machines. He lets the chilled droplets fall onto the pup's nose. The tiny creature twitches, not with fear, but with something like instinct waking up. Daniel repeats the motion, one small drop at a time, coaxing the pup back toward the world. "You are doing good," he says quietly. "Just stay with me." A soft breeze slides across the lot, carrying a hint of distant creosote and the faint hum of cicadas. The pup's chest rises a little deeper this time, and Daniel feels a spark of cautious relief. A passing traveler steps out of a pickup and pauses, watching the Marine crouched in the shade with a puppy on his lap. The traveler offers a kindly nod, but says nothing. Daniel does not mind. He is focused entirely on the small life leaning against him. Trusting him without understanding why. The sun shifts slightly, casting a softer shadow over them. The pup lifts his head an inch, just enough for his whiskers to brush Daniel's hand. It is the smallest gesture, hardly more than a whisper of movement, yet it carries the weight of a promise. Daniel holds him closer, feeling that familiar ache in his chest begin to change into something gentler, something like hope. "That is it," he murmurs, "keep fighting." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by dust, heat, and the hum of a gas station that has seen thousands of travelers come and go, the Marine and the tiny German shepherd share a fragile breath of mercy that neither of them expected when the day began. The shade at the small desert gas station stretches just a little farther as the sun tilts west, softening the hard glare that has pressed against the land all afternoon. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer keeps the tiny German shepherd puppy close, feeling the faint warmth of the small body against his palm. The pup's breathing, though still fragile, has steadied into a rhythm that makes Daniel hope in quiet increments. He dips his fingers again into the cooler's melting ice water and lets a few chilled droplets fall onto the pup's nose. The tiny creature twitches, then tries to nuzzle toward the moisture, guided by instinct more than strength. Daniel smiles faintly, the kind of smile that belongs to a man who does not dare celebrate but cannot help feeling gratitude for the smallest sign of life. He glances toward the station door, where the glass glows gold from the lowering sun. He needs real help soon. The nearest town is still miles away, but there is a clinic on the map, a small veterinary office tucked near the foothills, maybe a 20-minute drive if the engine cooperates and the desert allows them safe passage. "All right, little guy," Daniel murmurs, lifting the pup gently, "we are going to keep moving. You and me." The pup's ear flutters at the vibration of Daniel's voice, not fully alert but acknowledging the sound in some quiet, instinctive way. Daniel rises, carrying him carefully, mindful of how light he feels, like a breath wrapped in fur. The gravel crunches under his boots as he returns to the truck. The air inside is warmer than he hoped, but not unbearable. He places the pup back on the folded field jacket and adjusts the vents so the coolness reaches him first. When Daniel turns the key, the engine hesitates, grumbling under the strain, but finally settles into a steady hum. He exhales in relief. The road ahead glows with that late afternoon shimmer, the kind that blurs the horizon into soft bands of gold and amber. Daniel pulls out onto the highway, driving slower than before, watching the engine temperature needle as closely as he watches the pup's tiny movements. A few minutes into the drive, the pup shifts again, nudging his nose against the jacket. It is not strong, not confident, but it is purposeful. Daniel's heart lifts. "You are fighting," he whispers. "I see you." The desert wind pushes against the truck, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and sun-baked earth. The light begins to soften, turning the sky into a canvas of warm pastels. Daniel remembers another day, years ago, when he carried a wounded soldier across dunes under a heat that felt just as merciless. He remembers the weight of responsibility, the hope he clung to, and the ache that followed when hope was not enough. Now, looking at the small form beside him, he feels that same responsibility rise again, but this time it is paired with something gentler, something that feels like a second chance whispered into the quiet. The pup's chest rises deeper, steadier, as if the cooler air is beginning to ease the strain. Daniel reaches over, resting his fingertips lightly against the pup's back, offering comfort through presence alone. "We are almost there," he says softly, watching the road narrow into a ribbon of possibility. And in the fading heat of the desert, with hope flickering like a small flame inside the cab, the Marine keeps driving toward the promise of help and the fragile life depending on him. The late afternoon light stretches across the highway as Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer keeps driving toward the small foothill town marked on his map. The sky has softened into gentle shades of peach and rose, and the desert that once felt harsh and endless now carries a quieter tone, as if the land itself is holding its breath for the tiny German shepherd puppy nestled beside him. The pup lies on the folded field jacket, his breathing steadier now, rising in delicate waves that make Daniel's chest loosen with cautious hope. Every few minutes, the little creature shifts, an ear flicking or a paw stretching just slightly, signs that life has not given up on him. Daniel reaches over, letting his fingertips brush the pup's back gently, offering warmth without weight. "You are almost there," he whispers, watching the road unwind through the windshield. A few miles later, the first sign of the town appears, a weathered wooden board that reads, Cedar Ridge, elevation 3,280 feet. Behind it, the foothills rise like dark silhouettes against the glowing sky. The road narrows as it curves between clusters of juniper trees, and Daniel slows the truck, careful not to jostle the small passenger who depends entirely on him. The veterinary clinic comes into view just as the sun dips lower, its windows lit with soft yellow light that spills out onto the gravel lot. The sign above the door reads, Cedar Ridge Animal Care, the paint chipped but welcoming. Daniel parks near the entrance and turns off the engine, listening to the cooling tick of metal beneath the hood. He gathers the pup into his arms, cradling him as if holding something made of moonlight and breath. The pup leans weakly into his chest, his nose brushing the fabric of Daniel's shirt. That tiny movement sends a gentle ache through the Marine, a reminder of how close the little creature came to being lost on the hard desert road. Daniel steps into the clinic, greeted by the subtle scent of antiseptic, clean floors, and something warm and comforting, like old wood. A receptionist looks up from her desk, her expression softening immediately when she sees the bundle in Daniel's arms. "Oh my goodness," she says quietly, standing. "Bring him right back. The doctor is still here." Daniel nods his thanks, following her down a narrow hallway lined with framed pictures of rescued pets. The pup lets out a tiny sound, not fearful, but weary, as if telling the world he is still here. Inside the small exam room, the veterinarian, a calm woman with warm eyes, gestures for Daniel to lay the pup on the padded table. Her hands move with practiced gentleness, checking the pup's hydration and temperature, listening carefully to his breathing. Daniel watches, feeling the weight of each second, each shallow breath. The veterinarian looks up at him with a steady, reassuring nod. "He is very dehydrated," she says softly, "but he is fighting. You got him here in time." Daniel releases a breath he did not realize he had been holding. The pup shifts again, a soft tremor of life pushing through exhaustion. "Stay with us, little guy," Daniel whispers, his voice a quiet anchor in the softly lit room. And as the humming machines begin their work, and the desert dusk settles outside, a fragile sense of hope fills the space between the Marine and the tiny soul who refused to give up. The soft hum of the veterinary clinic fills the room as Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer stands beside the exam table, watching the tiny German Shepherd puppy settle under the gentle glow of the overhead lamp. The veterinarian prepares a small line of fluids, her movements calm and precise, the kind of steady reassurance that eases the tension sitting heavy in Daniel's chest. The pup lies curled on a warm blanket, his breathing still thin but less erratic than before, each rise of his little chest a quiet testament to the fight inside him. The veterinarian places a comforting hand on the pup's side and looks toward Daniel. "He is exhausted," she says softly, "but he is responding. His body just needs time and hydration." Daniel nods, but his eyes stay fixed on the fragile shape before him. The pup gives a faint twitch of his ear, almost as if acknowledging the voices around him. Daniel leans slightly closer, keeping his voice low and steady. "You are doing good, little guy," he whispers. Outside the window, the last traces of daylight retreat across the foothills, leaving behind a soft blue haze that settles over Cedar Ridge. The quiet of early evening drifts into the clinic, making everything feel slower, gentler, as if the world is offering the small creature a moment of peace to gather strength. The veterinarian steps away briefly to prepare supplies, leaving Daniel alone with the pup. He slides one hand forward, letting his fingers rest lightly against the blanket near the tiny body, close enough to offer presence without pressing. For a moment, he simply breathes, grounding himself in the steady rhythm of the pup's fragile life. The memory of the desert road flickers across his mind, the heat, the silence, the stillness that felt too final. He had seen life slip away in harsh places before, but something about this little pup lying helpless on the asphalt had struck a chord deep inside him, stirring a piece of his heart he thought the world had hardened long ago. The door swings open softly as the veterinarian returns with fresh supplies. She adjusts the fluid flow and checks the pup's breathing again. He is showing small improvements, she says. Sometimes, even the smallest drop of water or a moment of care is enough to turn things around. Daniel absorbs the words, feeling their quiet truth settle in him. The pup stirs again, lifting his head just the slightest bit before resting it back down. It is barely a movement, but it is purposeful. A choice to stay. A choice to keep trying. Daniel feels the weight of that choice. He straightens a little, letting the warmth of the moment soften the edges of his own memories. "You are a tough one," he murmurs to the pup, his voice carrying a note of admiration. In the stillness of the softly lit room, with machines humming their steady rhythm and the desert dusk pressing gently against the windows, the Marine and the tiny pup share a quiet moment of fragile hope. And though the night is settling in, there is a sense that daylight is waiting just beyond it, ready to rise when the little one is strong enough to see it. Night settles gently around Cedar Ridge Animal Care, its quiet stretching across the foothills like a soft blanket. Inside the exam room, the glow from the overhead lamp casts a warm halo around the tiny German Shepherd puppy resting on his padded blanket. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer remains at his side, steady and silent, as if his presence alone could keep the fragile thread of life from slipping away. The clinic has grown still. The receptionist has closed up front, the hallway lights have dimmed, and only the faint hum of machinery and the rhythmic tick of a wall clock fill the air. The veterinarian finishes another check and offers Daniel a reassuring nod before stepping out to update the pup's chart. Suddenly the room feels larger, quieter, and the weight of the moment settles in. Daniel leans forward, resting his forearms gently on the edge of the exam table. He watches the small rise and fall of the pup's breathing, memorizing it, anchoring himself to it. The pup's eyelids flutter, then open just a sliver. Two soft amber eyes find Daniel's silhouette. They are not strong, not fully aware, but they hold a question, a quiet spark. Daniel's breath catches. "Hey there," he whispers, voice low and warm, "you are still with me." The pup makes a tiny movement, shifting his head just enough for his nose to brush against Daniel's fingers. The touch is feather-light, but it carries a depth that stops the Marine's heart for a beat. After everything the little creature has endured, he is reaching toward the first person who paused long enough to notice him. Daniel's hand trembles slightly as he adjusts the blanket around the pup's body, tucking the edges to keep the warmth close. He has done this gesture before on long nights overseas, watching over someone who needed strength. Memories of those nights stir in him now, soft but undeniable. The pup blinks slowly, the small muscles in his face trying to make sense of the world returning around him. His ears shift at the sound of Daniel's voice, not fully lifting, but responding. It is a small miracle in motion, one breath stitched to the next. "You are safe," Daniel says under his breath, as if promising something sacred. The veterinarian returns quietly, checking the fluid line and listening to the pup's heartbeat with her stethoscope. After a moment she looks up with gentle eyes. "His heart sounds a little stronger," she says softly. "It is faint, but it is steadying." Daniel nods, absorbing the words like water reaching cracked earth. The pup's eyes drift closed again, but this time it feels different. Not collapse. Not surrender. Rest. Healing. A breath later, the little tail gives the slightest twitch beneath the blanket, so small it could be missed by anyone not watching closely. But Daniel sees it, and the softest smile curves across his tired face. "There you go," he murmurs, "you keep fighting, and I will stay right here." The room grows quieter still, as if the world itself is leaning in, holding space for the fragile bond forming between a Marine and a tiny soul who refused to be forgotten. And in that hush, a new strength begins to rise, gentle, persistent, and unmistakably alive. The night deepens outside Cedar Ridge Animal Care, settling over the foothills in quiet. Layers of blue and silver. Inside the softly lit exam room, the tiny German Shepherd puppy rests beneath a warm blanket, his breathing slow but no longer fragile enough to tremble. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer remains by his side, one hand resting lightly near the pup's small paws, as if anchoring him to the world with nothing more than presence and quiet devotion. The veterinarian steps in once more, checking the fluid line, her expression thoughtful. She listens to the pup's heartbeat, her brow softening as the faint rhythm comes through her stethoscope. "It is still weak," she says gently, "but it is steadying. He is not out of danger yet, but he is trying very hard." Her words settle into Daniel like a weight and a mercy at the same time. He nods, watching the pup's tiny chest rise with another breath that is just slightly deeper than before. When the veterinarian steps out to prepare additional hydration, the room falls into a peaceful silence. Only the hum of the small machine and the soft tick of the clock remain. Daniel sits back in the chair, exhausted but unwilling to close his eyes. The pup shifts then, a small movement beneath the blanket, and his nose presses faintly against the Marine's hand. Daniel freezes, startled by the deliberate touch. The pup opens his eyes again, just a thin shimmer of amber peeking through. There is no fear in them, only a quiet searching, as if he is looking for the steady voice that carried him through the desert heat. Daniel leans forward, lowering his voice to a soft whisper. "I am right here." The pup blinks slowly, then releases a breath that sounds almost like relief. But just as Daniel lets hope swell in his chest, the tiny body slumps deeper into the blanket. His breathing becomes shallow, thin, almost silent. The spark in his eyes dims, and his head rolls gently to the side. The room seems to tighten around Daniel, the air growing heavier as he instinctively reaches out, placing his hand near the pup's side. "Hey, come on now," he murmurs, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. "You were fighting." But the pup's breaths drift toward stillness again, each one weaker than the last. The machine hums steadily, but the sound feels distant, swallowed by the hush pressing close. Daniel lowers his forehead toward his clasped hands, feeling the weight of the moment closing in like a familiar shadow. He has been here before, watching life slip soft as sand through fingers trying desperately to hold it. He breathes in deeply, steadying himself, then whispers into the quiet room, "Do not give up, little guy. Not yet. You are not alone this time." The pup does not move. His tiny chest barely rises. For a heartbeat, it feels as though the long road through the desert has ended here, in this small room with its warm light and weary hope. And in the stillness that follows, Daniel closes his eyes, holding on to the faintest thread of faith, waiting for a sign that the tiny soul beside him has not let go. The quiet in the exam room deepens, stretching into a stillness that feels almost too heavy for the small space. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer keeps his hand near the tiny German Shepherd puppy's chest, waiting for the next breath, hoping to feel even the smallest rise beneath his fingertips. For a long moment, nothing comes. The pup lies motionless, his little head resting on the blanket, his body softened by exhaustion. The room seems to dim around Daniel as the absence of movement settles in. He leans closer, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Do not go," he murmurs, steady and pleading at the same time. The hum of the machine continues, indifferent and constant. The clock ticks softly in the background, each second stretching thin. The veterinarian steps back into the room just then, her shoes quiet against the floor. Daniel does not look up. His eyes stay locked on the small body before him. She approaches slowly, sensing the shift in the air. When she reaches the table, she places a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. He finally lifts his gaze to meet hers, and she sees the question he does not speak. She leans in, listening for the faint heartbeat she had heard earlier. Her brow tightens slightly. "He is very weak," she says softly, her voice full of compassion. "Sometimes their bodies pause like this when they are deciding whether to keep fighting." Daniel swallows, feeling the truth of her words and the uncertainty wrapped around them. He turns back to the pup, brushing his thumb lightly across one tiny paw. "You are not alone," he whispers. "Whatever you choose, you are not alone." The pup remains still. The veterinarian adjusts the fluid line, her movements gentle and measured. She steps back, giving Daniel space. The silence stretches again. And then, out of the quiet, a sound breaks through, soft, small, almost imperceptible. A faint sigh. Daniel stills, his breath catching as the tiny body shivers once, a delicate tremor running through the pup's frame. Then a breath comes. Shallow, but real. Another follows, a little deeper, like a spark catching the edge of dry tinder. The veterinarian leans in quickly, her eyes widening with relief. There it is, she whispers. He is responding. Daniel lets out a long breath, his shoulders sagging as if a weight he has carried all day finally loosens. He brings his hand closer to the pup, and the little nose twitches, brushing weakly against his skin. It is the smallest movement, but it carries the force of a miracle. The pup attempts to lift his head, barely managing more than a tilt, but the intention is there, a flicker of determination returning to his tiny frame. Daniel's voice softens into something almost like awe. There you are, he murmurs, the words slow and gentle. I knew you were still in there. The veterinarian smiles, her relief evident. He is fighting, she says quietly. This is a very good sign. The pup exhales again, this time a breath that feels steadier, more anchored. His amber eyes open just a crack, finding Daniel's silhouette in the warm light. And in that glow, in that fragile return from the edge, the room feels different. Brighter. Warmer. As if hope itself has stepped back into the space, settling gently beside them on the exam table. The warm glow inside Cedar Ridge Animal Care settles into something gentler, as if the very walls are breathing easier now that the tiny German Shepherd puppy has taken those first fragile steps back toward life. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer remains close, his hand resting lightly beside the pup, steady as a heartbeat. The little creature's breathing has deepened, each small rise of his chest no longer a struggle but a slow gathering of strength. The veterinarian steps quietly back into the room, her expression softening as she observes the pup's subtle but undeniable progress. She adjusts the blanket around him and offers Daniel a reassuring smile. He is stabilizing, she says softly. It will take time, but his body is responding beautifully. Daniel nods, but his eyes stay on the tiny soul lying before him. The pup opens his eyes again, this time for a little longer, the amber glow catching the gentle light above. He looks at Daniel as if he remembers something, maybe the warmth of being held against a broad chest in the desert heat, or the cool drops of water on his tongue when everything felt like it was slipping away. Daniel leans closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You are safe now. Take your time. The pup shifts, stretching one small paw outward, pressing gently into Daniel's fingers. The touch is light, but it carries a quiet confidence, a sign that the little one is no longer teetering on the edge but beginning to move back toward the world. Minutes pass, slow and steady, and the pup continues to breathe deeper, more evenly. The veterinarian brings a small bowl of water, placing it gently near the edge of the blanket. At first the pup does not respond, until a soft encouragement from Daniel draws his gaze. The tiny nose twitches, and the pup makes a small effort to lift his head. It wobbles, shaky and uncertain, but after a moment he manages it. Daniel steadies the bowl with one hand. Go ahead, he murmurs. The pup leans forward, tongue touching the surface of the water. It is just one sip, then a second, but to Daniel it feels like witnessing dawn breaking after a long night. The veterinarian smiles warmly. That is a very good sign, she says. If he can drink on his own, even just a little, his chances improve significantly. Daniel exhales slowly, letting the relief wash through him. The pup settles back down, curling slightly into the blanket, but now his breathing is full and steady, his tiny body no longer limp with exhaustion. He lifts his head again after a moment, pressing it softly into the warmth of Daniel's hand, as if claiming a connection he has decided to trust. You are a brave little guy, Daniel whispers, brushing a thumb gently over the pup's soft ear. Outside, the night deepens over the foothills, stars beginning to shimmer in the clear Arizona sky. Inside the quiet clinic, hope fills the room like a warm tide rising slowly along a deserted shoreline. And as the pup drifts into a peaceful rest, no longer on the fragile edge between staying and slipping away, a calm and steady sense of renewal settles between the marine and the tiny life he refused to let go. Morning edges gently into Cedar Ridge, brushing the windows of the small clinic with a pale ribbon of gold. The night's stillness begins to lift, and inside the exam room the tiny German Shepherd puppy wakes to the soft light as if drawn back toward the world by something warm and familiar. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer has not moved far from the table. He sits in the same chair, posture steady despite the long hours, his eyes softened with quiet gratitude as he watches the little pup stretch beneath the blanket. The veterinarian enters with a fresh chart in her hands, her smile brightening at the sight before her. "He made it through the night," she says warmly. "That is a very encouraging sign." Daniel nods, unable to look away from the small creature who now attempts to lift his head again, this time with a touch more control, a hint of confidence and emotion. The pup's amber eyes blink slowly, adjusting to the morning light, then drift upward until they find Daniel. It is a soft recognition, a gentle acknowledgement that feels like a thread stitching trust between them. Daniel moves closer, resting his hand on the table so the pup can reach him. The little nose nudges his fingers, not with desperation as before, but with intention. A greeting. A thank you. A beginning. "Good morning, little guy," Daniel murmurs, his voice lined with warmth. The puppy releases a small sound, something between a sigh and a tiny hum, before attempting to shuffle forward. His legs shake under the effort, but the determination in him is unmistakable. The veterinarian steadies him with one hand, laughing softly. "He has spirit. That is going to help him heal even faster." She offers Daniel a bowl of softened food, something gentle enough for a recovering pup. Daniel holds it near the edge of the blanket, and the little one sniffs the air, then leans forward, taking the smallest bite. It is clumsy and slow, but it is nourishment, and it fills the room with a quiet triumph Daniel can feel in his chest. "You are full of surprises," he whispers. The veterinarian steps back, letting them share the moment. Daniel watches the pup finish a few bites before settling again, curling slightly toward the warmth of Daniel's arm. As the morning light strengthens, the room feels less like an emergency space and more like a sanctuary, an in-between place where fragile things are allowed to grow strong again. Daniel strokes the soft fur behind the pup's ear, feeling the tiny heartbeat beneath his fingers, no longer erratic but steady, sure. The pup shifts closer, pressing his head into Daniel's hand with a trust that feels almost sacred. "You are something else," Daniel says softly. Outside, the foothills glow under the rising sun, and a soft breeze moves through the open window, carrying with it the scent of pine and dust. Inside, the marine and the small pup share a quiet bond, one formed not through training or command, but through mercy, endurance, and a night spent standing on the thin edge between loss and a second chance. And as the pup drifts into another peaceful rest, this time wrapped in safety rather than fear, Daniel knows with a certainty he cannot explain that something in his own life has shifted too, turning toward the light just as the morning settles fully into the world. The morning at Cedar Ridge grows brighter, washing the foothills in soft gold as the little German Shepherd puppy continues to gather strength beneath the gentle care of the clinic. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer sits close as always, his posture relaxed now, his eyes holding a quiet softness that was not there the day before. The pup awakens again, blinking slowly, stretching his small legs with newfound confidence. A faint wag stirs at the tip of his tail, barely more than a whisper of movement, yet it carries all the promise of a life stepping back into itself. The veterinarian enters with a chart tucked under her arm, her smile widening at the sight. "He is improving beautifully," she says in a warm tone. "Another day of rest and hydration, and he will be strong enough to go home." The word home lingers in the air, settling around Daniel in a gentle way. He glances down at the pup, who now lifts his head fully, ears tilting forward as if listening not just to the sound but to the meaning behind it. Daniel reaches out, letting the tiny nose nuzzle his palm. The small gesture feels like a question, a quiet hope. Yeah, Daniel whispers, I hear you. The pup shifts closer, pressing his side against Daniel's hand. The veterinarian chuckles softly. He has already chosen you, she says. Animals know who saved them. Daniel breathes out slowly, absorbing her words. He had not planned any of this when he left the base yesterday. The desert road, the unbearable heat, the still shape on the asphalt, it all feels distant now, like a memory carried on a hot wind. And yet, everything changed in those moments. Now, this tiny life looks to him with trust so pure it softens places in his heart he thought would stay hardened forever. The veterinarian checks the pup's vitals again, noting the steady improvement. He will still need care, she adds. Rest, small meals, water, warmth, patience. But he has a very good chance. Daniel nods, the decision forming inside him not with force but with a quiet certainty. The pup gazes up at him again, eyes clear and full of gentle expectation. Daniel strokes the soft fur behind the pup's ear, feeling the warmth of life pulsing steadily beneath his fingertips. I guess we are in this together now, he murmurs. The pup answers by leaning fully into his touch, as if sealing a silent promise. Outside, a breeze drifts through the open window, carrying the scent of juniper and morning air. Daniel stands, stretching out the stiffness of a night spent in a clinic chair. The veterinarian hands him a small collar, simple and soft, something meant for a young pup just starting life. You can use this when he is ready, she says with a gentle smile. Daniel holds it in his palm, feeling the weight of it, light, but meaningful. He looks at the pup, whose tail flickers again, stronger this time, as if urging him on. I think I will call you Dusty, Daniel says quietly. The pup's ears perk at the sound of his new name, and for the first time, a soft spark of joy lights his eyes. The quiet bond between them settles deeper, steady and sure, like dawn anchoring itself to the horizon. And as the morning sun continues to rise, filling the small room with warm light, Daniel knows that the desert road did not just deliver him to a helpless pup, it delivered him to a purpose he did not know he was missing. The foothills glow under the gentle rise of afternoon light as Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer steps out of Cedar Ridge Animal Care with the tiny German Shepherd puppy cradled against his chest. Dusty, now stronger and no longer trembling, presses his warm nose into the fabric of Daniel's shirt, as if memorizing the heartbeat that never left his side. The air is cool for the first time in days, carrying the faint scent of pine and sun-warmed earth. Daniel pauses beside his truck, feeling the quiet weight of the moment settle around them. He opens the passenger door and sets the folded field jacket on the seat, shaping it into a small nest. Dusty looks up at him, ears twitching with curiosity, his amber eyes brighter than they have ever been. Daniel lifts him gently into the cab. The pup turns in a slow circle before settling into the familiar jacket, releasing a soft hum of comfort. Daniel smiles, an expression that reaches deeper than simple relief. He slowly adjusts the tiny collar the veterinarian gave him, buckling it with care. The tag jingles softly, a new sound in Dusty's world. There you go, Daniel says quietly. A fresh start. Dusty responds by nudging Daniel's finger with his nose, a small but deliberate gesture, as if to claim the man who saved him as his own. The engine hums to life, smoother now after the long night of rest. Daniel pulls onto the winding road that leads out of Cedar Ridge, driving slowly through the warm light that spills across the hills. Dusty shifts closer to him, resting his head on Daniel's leg with innocent trust. The touch is gentle, like a quiet thank you. Mile by mile, the desert stretches open before them, no longer a place of danger but a backdrop for something new taking root. The horizon glows with soft gold, and the sky feels impossibly wide. Daniel keeps one hand on the wheel and the other resting near Dusty, steady and present. The little pup's breathing is calm now, a peaceful rhythm filled with promise. As they reach a long stretch of open road, Dusty lifts his head and looks out the window, ears perked, tail giving one small wag as the wind brushes across his face. It is a simple gesture, but Daniel feels it settle inside. him like a blessing. A silent reminder that some hearts return to life one small miracle at a time. The road rolls forward, endless and bright. Dusty shifts again, curling closer to Daniel's side before drifting into a soft, contented sleep. And Daniel drives on, the quiet bond between man and pup deepening with every mile, carrying them both toward a future neither of them expected when their paths first crossed on a blistering strip of desert highway.